It was a cold night, and the human man sat alone in his small house. The world outside was quiet. Too quiet, as if the night itself was holding its breath. He liked nights like this, calm and still, where nothing strange happened. But that night was not like the others. It was the night that changed everything. A faint sound broke the silence. At first, he thought it was only the wind tapping against the wooden door, but then it came again, a weak, soft knock, like someone who had no strength left. He froze, his heart beating faster, because no one ever came to his house at this hour. The village was far away and visitors were rare. Who could it be knocking so gently at his door in the middle of the night? He stood up slowly, his hand brushing against the table as if to steady himself. The sound came again, weaker than before. It was not the knock of someone strong, it was the cry of someone desperate. His curiosity grew, but so did his fear. He took a deep breath and moved to the door. For a moment, he thought of ignoring it. But something deep inside him whispered that whoever was outside needed help. With a careful hand, he pulled the door open, and what he saw made his eyes widen in shock. A figure lay collapsed on the doorstep. Not human, not like anyone he had ever seen before. It was a woman, but her skin was pale with a faint glow. Her hair was silver white, tangled and wet from the cold night air. Her body was thin, too thin, like she had not eaten for many days. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came out, only a faint sound of pain. For a moment he could not move. An alien, right at his door, weak and helpless. His mind raced with questions. Why was she here, alone, in such a state? Was this a trap, or was she truly in need? But when he looked into her eyes, all doubts fell away. They were not the eyes of a trickster, not the eyes of an enemy. They were the eyes of someone broken, scared, and starving. She tried to lift her hand as if begging for help. Her fingers shook, and then her arm fell weakly to the ground. The man's chest tightened. He could not just stand there and watch her die. Against every fear, against every doubt, he bent down. "Can you hear me?" he whispered softly, not sure if she understood. Her lips moved, but the sound was too faint. Still, he could see the plea in her gaze, the desperate cry for mercy. With a deep breath, he made his choice. He placed his arms under her fragile body and lifted her up. She was lighter than he expected. Too light, as if she had been starving for weeks. Her head fell, weakly against his shoulder. He carried her inside, closing the door with his foot. The warmth of the room touched her skin and she gave a faint sigh, almost like relief. He laid her down gently on the old couch. She looked so small, so weak. Yet there was something strange about her. Her skin shimmered faintly under the candlelight. It was not human skin, but it was soft, delicate, almost fragile. Her chest rose and fell quickly, as if every breath was a battle. The man fetched a blanket and covered her trembling. Then he hurried to the kitchen, grabbing bread, water, and whatever food he had. When he returned, he found her eyes half open, staring at him. She looked scared, as if she was not sure if he would help or hurt her. He broke a piece of bread and held it out. Her hands shook as she tried to reach, but she was too weak, so he placed it gently. Near her mouth, she hesitated, then took a small bite and another. The hunger in her eyes was painful to watch. She ate slowly, carefully, as if she had forgotten what food was. The man sat beside her, watching silently, his mind full of questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she here at his door? But for now, he pushed the questions away, because what mattered was simple. She was alive, but only barely, and she needed him. And though she was a stranger, though she was not human, something inside him whispered that this meeting was not an accident. That night, as the wind howled outside and the stars shone cold above, a human man and a starving alien woman sat under the same roof. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning of something greater than both of them. The knock at the door had been unexpected, but it was the sound that would change his life forever. The man sat in silence, watching the alien woman rest on his couch. Her breathing was uneven, shallow, like she was fighting a battle inside her body. Every small sound she made echoed in his ears. He had brought her in, fed her, and covered her with a blanket. But now, doubt began to creep into his mind. What if he had made a mistake? He stood near the window, peeking outside into the dark night. The trees swayed with the cold wind and the stars hung above like watchful eyes. Was someone out there searching for her? Would they come knocking on his door next? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He had never asked for trouble, but trouble had come to him. Behind him, he heard a faint movement. He turned and saw her struggling to sit up. Her silver hair fell across her face, her thin arms trembling as she pushed herself upright. Her eyes met his, wide and scared. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Finally, her lips parted and a soft, broken sound escaped. It was not English, not any human language, but the tone was clear. It was the sound of someone begging. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. "It's all right," he whispered, though he was not sure if she understood. She flinched at his voice, then lowered her head. Her body shook with weakness, but also with fear. The man's chest tightened. He wanted to help her, but the question haunted him. Was it safe? He looked. At her glowing skin, faint like moonlight, he had never seen anything like her. If others discovered she was here, they might accuse him of hiding an enemy. They might take her away, or worse. But then he remembered the way she had collapsed at his door. He remembered her desperate eyes, her trembling hands reaching out for food. Was that the face of an enemy? Or was it simply the face of someone abandoned? Someone desperate to live his thoughts battled inside him. Part of him screamed to open the door, to leave her outside, to forget this ever happened. But another part whispered that turning her away would be no different than killing her. She had come to his door not by chance, but because fate had pushed her there, and now fate was testing him. The woman tried to stand, but her legs gave out. He rushed forward, catching her before she fell. Her weight was light in his arms too, light, and her skin was cold against his hands. She looked up at him, her lips moving again. He could not understand the words, but he could feel the meaning. She was asking not to be left alone. The man sighed deeply, feeling the weight of his choice. He set her back down and knelt beside her. "All right," he said softly. "You can stay for now." Her eyes widened, shimmering in the dim light. A faint smile touched her lips, though it quickly faded into exhaustion. She rested her head back against the couch, and in that small, silent moment, a fragile bond began to form. He went to the kitchen again, bringing more water. This time he watched carefully as she drank, her hands shaking as she lifted the cup. She coughed, spilling some, but he steadied her hand. For the first time, she did not flinch from his touch. It was as if she had accepted him. And in that acceptance, he felt something stir inside him. Responsibility. Hours passed slowly, the night deepening around the house, but the man could not sleep. He sat in a chair across from her, his eyes heavy but his mind restless. Every creak of the wooden walls, every whisper of the wind made him think of danger. If she had been abandoned, if she had run away, then surely others would come looking. What would he do when they arrived? Would he protect her, or give her up to save himself? As the fire in the small stove crackled softly, he studied her face. She looked peaceful now, asleep under the blanket. Her sharp, alien features softened in sleep, almost human-like. For a moment, he almost forgot she was different. She looked fragile, innocent, like a lost child who had found shelter at last. The man closed his eyes, leaning back in his chair. The decision was made, though he had not spoken it out loud. He would protect her no matter what came, even if it brought danger to his door, even if it turned his quiet life upside down, because deep inside, he knew this alien woman had no one else, and somehow she had chosen him. The night slowly gave way to the first light of dawn. Birds began to sing outside, unaware of the storm brewing inside the man's heart. He stood and looked once more. At the sleeping figure on his couch, she was a stranger, a mystery, a risk he should not take. And yet, she was also a life he had saved, a life that now depended on him. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger, but one truth was clear. The man had opened his door not just to a stranger but to a new destiny, and there would be no turning back. The morning light crept slowly through the small cracks in the wooden walls. The man opened his tired eyes, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. He had dozed off while watching the alien woman. When he looked at her now, he saw her staring back at him. Her eyes were wide, glowing faintly in the daylight, filled with both fear and curiosity. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She did not move, and he did not move. It was as if they were two strangers caught in a silent test. Finally, the woman tilted her head, studying him carefully. Her lips moved, forming soft sounds, strange and broken. The man shook his head gently. "I don't understand," he said quietly. But she kept trying, repeating the same strange words, her voice trembling with effort. She wanted to speak to him, even if the gap between their worlds was too wide. He walked to the table and picked up a loaf of bread. When he returned, he tore off a piece and handed it to her. Her hand shook as she reached out, but this time she took it herself, not waiting for him to place it near her mouth. She ate slowly, chewing carefully, as though she feared the food might vanish. The man noticed how she looked at him while eating. It was not suspicion anymore, but something softer, something like trust. After she finished, he tried to speak again. "Where are you from?" he asked, pointing to the sky. Her eyes followed his finger, and she nodded faintly. Then, she tapped her chest weakly and said a single word. It was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. He repeated it clumsily, trying to match her sound. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for the first time, her lips curved into a small smile. It was a fragile smile, but it was real. In that smile, the man felt something shift inside him. She was no longer just a mystery, no longer just a risk. She was becoming someone. But innocence can also carry shadows. Later that day, the man tried to step outside to gather firewood. The moment he reached for the door, the woman's body tensed. She let out a frightened cry, scrambling off the couch. Her weak hands clutched his arm tightly, pulling him back. Her eyes darted to the sky through the small window. Her entire body shook as she whispered hurried words he could not understand. But her fear was clear. Something out there scared her. Something she did not want him to face. The man gently placed his hand over hers. "It's all right," he said softly, though inside he was not so sure. She shook her head fiercely, her silver hair falling across her face. Her breathing grew fast, almost panicked. He pulled her hands away carefully and pointed to the woodpile outside. He tried to show her it was safe, but her eyes stayed full of dread. At last he gave up, staying inside. Her reaction troubled him. Why would she fear the open sky so much unless something was truly out there? As the day passed, he noticed other strange things. The way she flinched when she heard loud noises, the way her eyes darted to every shadow. She acted like someone who had been hunted, someone who had lived too long in fear. And yet when she looked at him, her gaze softened as though he was the only place she felt safe. That evening, he tried again to speak with her. He pointed to himself. "Human," he said slowly. Then he tapped his chest, repeating the word. She watched carefully, then pointed at him and said it back. Man," she echoed, her voice uncertain but clear. He nodded, smiling faintly, and she seemed pleased. Then she tapped her chest again and repeated the word she had whispered before. He tried it again, fumbling with the strange sound. Her laughter, soft and musical, filled the small room. For a moment, the fear between them melted into something lighter, something innocent. But innocence can only last so long. As the night grew darker, the man stepped outside despite her protests. He needed more wood for the fire. The air was cold, and the silence heavy. Yet as he bent to gather the logs, a strange flicker of light caught his eye. High above, in the distance, something moved across the sky. Not a star, not a plane. Something slower, something searching. His stomach tightened as he realized the truth. She was not wrong to be afraid. When he returned inside, she was waiting at the door, trembling. Her eyes filled with tears as she pointed to the sky through the window. She spoke quickly, her voice sharp with terror. He did not need to understand her words to know what she meant. They were looking for her, and if they found her here, they would take her away, or worse. The man closed the door firmly, his heart pounding. He looked at the fragile alien woman, who now sat curled up on the couch, her face buried in her hands. Strange, yes, different, yes, but dangerous, no. She was not a monster, not a threat. She was only innocent, only afraid. And now she was his responsibility. As the fire burned low, he sat across from her once more. His thoughts were heavy, but his choice was becoming clear. If others came looking for her, he would have to decide. Would he hand her over or protect her at any cost? For now, he only knew one thing. This alien woman, fragile and strange, had become more than just a stranger. She was a part of his life, and the bond between them was growing stronger with every passing moment. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. The man sat near the couch, watching the alien woman. She had curled under the blanket, her glowing skin faint in the flickering light, but her eyes were open, wide and restless, as if haunted by shadows he could not see. For hours, she had tried to speak, forming strange words he did not understand, but now her voice carried a different tone, low and trembling. It was not the sound of someone asking for food or warmth. It was the sound of someone carrying a secret too heavy to bear. The man leaned closer. "What is it?" he whispered. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. Her lips moved again, slowly this time, carefully. He shook his head, unable to understand. Frustration crossed her face, and then she did something unexpected. She pressed her hand to her chest, tapping hard. Then she stretched her arm outward, fingers spread wide, as if pointing to a distant world. Her voice cracked as she spoke, repeating the same word again and again. The man frowned, trying to piece together her meaning. "You, from there?" he asked, pointing upward to the stars. Her eyes filled with relief as she nodded quickly. Her lips trembled, repeating the word softly, as if saying the name of her lost home. Then she placed her hand over her stomach, tracing the outline of her ribs. Her body shook as she bent forward, her voice breaking into small sobs. The man's chest tightened, realizing what she was showing: hunger, suffering, abandonment. She had been cast away, left to starve, left to die. And now she was here, clinging to life only because his door had been open. He whispered gently, "They left you." She froze, her glowing eyes meeting his. Slowly, she nodded, her tears falling onto the blanket. The truth was out, simple yet terrible. Her own people had abandoned her, not because she was dangerous, but because she was weak. The man felt a sharp anger rise inside him. How could anyone leave her like this? She was fragile, yes, but she was alive. She was innocent, and yet they had thrown her away like she was nothing. He clenched his fists, the firelight dancing across his face. He had thought humans could be cruel, but now he knew cruelty was not limited to one world. The alien woman lifted her head again, her voice faint but steady. She spoke a stream of words, her hands moving quickly as if trying to paint her story in the air. The man watched, trying to catch the shapes, the emotions behind her gestures. He saw fear, flight, loneliness. Her eyes darted to the window, then back to him. It was clear. Someone was searching for her, not because they wanted to save her, but because they wanted to finish what had begun. The man sat back, his heart pounding. Every part of him screamed that keeping her was dangerous, but as he looked at her trembling form, he knew there was no other choice. She had no one, nowhere else to go, and if he let her fall back into their hands, it would mean her end. He rose to his feet and walked to the door, staring out at the cold night sky. The stars glimmered above, beautiful yet merciless. Somewhere up there. The ones who had abandoned her were still watching. Still searching, he whispered to himself. If they come, they'll have to go through me first. When he turned back, she was watching him with wide eyes. It was as if she had felt the strength in his words, even if she did not understand them. Her hand reached out, trembling, her fingers brushing against his arm. It was not just a touch, it was a plea, a thank you, a fragile bond growing stronger. And in that moment, the man realized something. He was no longer just helping a stranger. He was protecting someone who had been denied family, someone who needed him to be that family. The fire burned low as the hours passed. She finally drifted into sleep, her breathing soft and even. The man sat awake, his mind heavy with the truth. She had revealed her people had left her behind. Now others were searching for her, and he was the only shield she had. Outside, far above the earth, a faint light moved silently across the sky. It was not a star, not a plane. It was a ship. Scanning, hunting, unaware that the one it sought was now under the protection of a human who had made his choice. The man tightened his grip on the old rifle resting by the door. The storm was coming, but he was ready to face it. For her, for the bond they now shared, for the secret she had placed in his hands. That night in a small, lonely house, a fragile truth had been revealed, and with it a promise was silently made. He would protect her no matter the cost. Because she was no longer just a stranger at his door. She was part of his life, his family, and he would not let her be abandoned again. The morning began with silence, but it was not the peaceful kind. The man woke to find the alien woman already sitting up on the couch, her silver hair falling across her face. She was staring at the window, her glowing eyes wide, her body tense as if she felt something he could not. The man followed her gaze but saw nothing unusual, only the trees swaying gently in the wind. Yet the fear in her eyes told him something was wrong. He stepped outside, the air crisp and cold against his skin. The forest stretched out around his home. Quiet. Too quiet. Normally birds would be singing at this hour, but now there was only stillness. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. The man narrowed his eyes, scanning the sky, and then he saw it. A faint flicker of light, moving slowly across the horizon. It was not a star, not the sun, not anything human. It was a ship, distant but clear, its movements deliberate, searching. His stomach tightened, and he turned back quickly to the house. Inside, the alien woman had curled into the corner of the couch, her arms wrapped around herself. She whispered a string of words in her language, her voice trembling with fear. She pointed to the sky again, her hand shaking. He understood now. "They're looking for you," he said softly, though she could not understand his words. She nodded anyway, her eyes filling with tears. The man paced across the small room, his thoughts racing. How long before the ship came closer? How long before others arrived at his door? He looked at the alien woman, fragile and trembling. If they took her, she would not survive. He knew it as surely as he knew his own name. The day passed slowly, heavy with unease. Every sound outside made him jump. Every shadow felt like a threat. The alien woman stayed, close to him, never letting him move too far. When he walked to the door, she would clutch his sleeve, shaking her head. Her fear was deep, not of the forest, not of the cold, but of the sky itself. As evening fell, the man lit the fire again, the flames casting long shadows across the room. He tried to speak with her, tried to ease her fear. He pointed to himself, human, and then to her, repeating her name as best he could. Her lips curved faintly at his attempt, but the smile did not reach her eyes. She was still too afraid, too aware of the danger that hung above them. Later, when the night was at its darkest, he stepped outside again. This time he saw more, not one light, but three, drifting slowly in formation across the sky. They moved with purpose, scanning, sweeping, searching. His chest tightened as he realized the truth. The hunt had already begun, and it was only a matter of time before they found this place. He hurried back inside, shutting the door firmly. The alien woman looked at him, her body shaking as if she already knew. She whispered something quickly, her hands moving in desperate gestures. He could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. She wanted to leave, to run, to disappear before they arrived. But the man shook his head. "Running won't save you," he said, his voice steady. "They'll find you anywhere." She stared at him, her glowing eyes filled with despair. The man walked to the corner of the room and pulled out an old wooden chest. Inside lay a rifle, old but still strong. He held it in his hands, the weight of it heavy. It had been years since he had used it, but the memory returned quickly. The alien woman's eyes widened as she watched him load it. She shook her head, whispering frantically, but he only looked back at her, calm and steady. "If they come, I won't let them take you," he said. She could not understand his words, but she understood his resolve. The night dragged on, thick with tension. Every sound outside made the man tighten his grip on the rifle. The alien woman stayed close, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She was trembling, but she did not let go. It was as if she had chosen to place her fragile trust in him, and he knew he could not betray it. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. The walls of the small house seemed to vibrate softly. The man froze, his heart pounding. He rushed to the window and peered out. Above the trees, a beam of pale light swept slowly across the ground. It was a searchlight, moving closer, inch by inch toward his home. The alien woman let out a broken cry, her body curling tighter into the corner. Her fear was raw, heavy, almost enough to break him. But the man stood tall, rifle in hand, his jaw set. This was no longer about choice, no longer about fear. The danger was here, and he would face it. The light passed, fading slowly into the distance, but the message was clear. They knew she was close, they would return, and next time, they would not leave without her. The man turned back to her. She was staring at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, her lips parted, whispering a single word again and again. He could not understand it, but he felt the meaning. She was calling him her shield, her protector, her only hope. That night, as the fire burned low and the stars above shifted, the man knew the quiet life he once had was gone. The signs of danger were here, real and unavoidable. And now, he was no longer just a man with a home. He was a man standing against the storm. For her, for the fragile bond they had formed, for the family they were becoming. The night had never felt so heavy. The man sat by the door with the rifle across his knees. The alien woman curled close to the fire. Her glowing eyes watched him in silence, filled with both fear and hope. Outside, the forest stood still, but in the distance faint lights moved across the sky like predators circling their prey. The hum returned, low and steady, vibrating through the wooden walls of the house. The man's grip tightened on the rifle, his heart pounding against his chest. He stood and looked out the window, his breath fogging the glass. 3 ships hovered above the tree line, their beams sweeping the ground slowly. They were searching with precision, moving closer with every pass. The alien woman whimpered, her voice trembling with panic. She clutched the edge of his coat, shaking her head as if begging him not to fight. Her lips moved quickly, words spilling out in her strange language. He could not understand, but he knew her meaning. She wanted him to run, to save himself, but the man shook his head firmly. "No," he said, his voice low and steady. "They will not take you." Her eyes widened, shimmering in the firelight. For the first time, she saw not just kindness in him, but defiance. A human who would stand even against the impossible. The ships drew closer, their lights now cutting through the branches. Shadows danced across the ground as the beams swept over the house. The man stepped outside, his boots sinking into the dirt, the cold night air biting at his skin. He raised the rifle, his eyes locked on the sky. The alien woman stood behind him in the doorway, her silver hair glimmering under the faint glow. Her body shook, but she did not hide. Instead, she stood tall, her gaze fixed on the approaching danger. The hum grew louder, and then a sharp beam of light struck the ground just yards from the house. The air shimmered, and 3 tall figures emerged. They were not like her, not fragile or weak. They were armored, their movements sharp and confident. Their glowing eyes scanned the ground and then locked on him. One of them raised a hand, pointing, and a voice echoed in a strange, metallic tone. The man did not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. They wanted her. They wanted to take her back. He raised the rifle, aiming steadily. "Stay away," he growled, though he knew they could not understand. Still, his tone was sharp, his stance unshaken. The alien woman whispered something behind him, her voice soft but urgent. It sounded like a warning, like a plea. The armored figures stepped closer, their weapons glowing faintly in their hands. The man's finger tightened on the trigger, and then the first shot rang out. The sound split the silence of the forest, echoing far and wide. One of the figures staggered back, sparks flying from its armor. The others froze, their glowing eyes flashing with sudden anger. The alien woman gasped, clutching her chest. But when she looked at him, there was no fear. Only awe, a human standing against warriors far beyond his strength. The armored figures advanced quickly now, their steps shaking the ground. The man fired again, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. One shot grazed another, forcing it back, but the third raised its weapon, aiming directly at him. Before it could fire, a cry rang out from behind. The alien woman had stepped forward, her weak body trembling, her hands raised high. A faint glow burst from her palms, soft but steady. The beam from the warrior's weapon scattered in the air, broken apart like smoke. The man turned, shocked. She stood there, her face pale but determined, her glowing eyes fierce for the first time. She was not helpless, not completely, even weak. Even starved, she carried something inside her, something her people had feared, something that made them abandon her. But now, in this moment, she used it not for herself, but for him. The warriors hesitated, their heads tilting as if confused by her display. The man did not waste the moment. He fired again, striking one in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. The alien woman's glow flickered, her body shaking violently from the effort. She nearly collapsed, but the man caught her, holding her steady with one arm while keeping the rifle in the other. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice firm. She nodded weakly, her lips parting to speak. The words were broken, but he understood them. "Family," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The remaining warriors stepped back, their glowing eyes flickering as if in doubt. For the first time they seemed uncertain. The man stood tall, the alien woman leaning against him, her small hand clutching his sleeve. Together they faced the threat, human and alien, weak but unbroken. The ships above shifted, their light sweeping away as the warriors retreated into the night. They had not won, not fully, but they had not lost either. The enemy had seen something they did not expect. Resistance, defiance, unity. The man lowered the rifle slowly, his chest heaving with each breath. Beside him, the alien woman sagged against his arm, exhausted but alive. He carried her back inside, laying her gently on the couch. Her glowing eyes fluttered open, locking on his face. She whispered the word again, softer this time, almost like a promise. "Family." The man sat beside her, his hand resting over hers. The fire crackled low, the world outside heavy with silence once more. But inside the small house, something stronger burned. Not fear, not despair, but determination. The stand had only begun, and he knew the battle was far from over. But he also knew one truth. He was no longer alone, and neither was she. The house was quiet after the battle. The man sat on the floor beside the couch, his rifle leaning against the wall. The alien woman rested under the blanket, her body weak but her eyes open, watching him. The glow in her skin was faint now, dim like the last light of dusk. Yet her gaze was steady, no longer only fearful, but filled with something new, something warm. For hours, neither spoke. The crackle of the fire was the only sound. The man's body ached from the fight, but his mind was sharper than ever. The enemy had retreated, but he knew they would return. Still, he felt no regret, no fear. He looked at her and knew he would stand again and again if it meant keeping her safe. The alien woman shifted slightly, her small hand slipping from under the blanket. She reached for him, her fingers trembling. He hesitated, then placed his hand over hers. Her skin was cool to the touch, fragile, but her grip tightened with surprising strength. Her lips parted, and in her broken voice, she whispered again, "Family." The word struck him deeply. He had lived alone for years, his days quiet, his nights empty. Family was something he had lost long ago. Yet here was this fragile being, abandoned by her own kind, calling him that word. And for the first time in years, his heart felt full. He gave a small nod, his voice rough but steady. "Yes," he said softly. "Family." The days that followed were not easy. The ships lingered in the sky, their lights sweeping the forests at night. The man worked hard to keep the house hidden. Covering the windows, dimming the fire, he hunted quietly, moving carefully so as not to be seen. Every moment was a risk, but every moment together made the risk worth it. The alien woman grew stronger slowly. With food, warmth, and care, the glow in her skin returned. Her steps became steadier, her voice clearer. She began to learn his words, repeating them in her soft, careful way. When he pointed at the fire, she said, "Fire." When he pointed at the door, she said, "Door." And when he pointed to himself and said, "Human," she smiled and repeated it perfectly. Each small word was a bridge between them. Each moment of learning brought laughter, and sometimes tears, because both knew that no matter how different they were no longer alone, but danger never left. One evening, the hum returned, louder than before. The ships hovered low, their search more desperate. The alien woman froze, her body trembling again. But this time, she did not only hide. She stepped to the window beside him, her eyes glowing fiercely. Her voice was soft but steady. "No fear," she said in broken English. The man looked at her, surprised, and then smiled faintly. "No fear," he repeated. The searchlight swept past the house but did not stop. The enemy was close but not yet upon them. For now they were safe. That night, as the fire burned low, the alien woman sat close to him. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder. She whispered something in her own language, her voice soft as a lullaby. He did not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. She was thanking him, not just for food, not just for shelter, but for giving her something she had never known before: belonging. The man closed his eyes, his hand resting gently on hers. He thought of the night she had first collapsed at his door, weak and starving. He thought of how many times he had doubted, how many times he had almost turned away. And he realized that everything had led to this moment. A stranger had become his family, and he hers. The world outside was still dangerous. The ship still searched, and the enemy would not stop. But together they had found something stronger than fear. They had found trust. They had found hope. They had found family. As dawn broke, the light spilling through the cracks of the walls, the man rose and looked at the horizon. The alien woman joined him, her silver hair shining softly in the morning glow. For the first time, she did not look afraid of the sky. Instead, she looked at it with quiet strength. Whatever came, they would face it together. The man placed his arm gently around her shoulders. Her head leaned against him, and a faint smile touched her lips. From strangers to something more, their bond had been written not in words, but in sacrifice and trust. And as the wind carried the sounds of the forest around them, both knew the truth. They were no longer just survivors, they were family.